Good evening, my friends, and welcome back to the channel. Tonight, I am going to be going through a data log, and I thought, why not bring you guys along with me? I've had some people ask me, what's a data log? How do you read a data log? What do I do with a data log? How do I make a data log? So there are some questions that need answered. So what I'm going to do is walk you through a data log of a twin turbo car that I'm working on. There's a guy by the name of Gabriel. I'm working on a tune of his. I just finished up doing a BMF dash for him. If you don't know what that is, you got to check it out. I've got a website. I'll throw a link up here, but follow me on Instagram. I'll throw that up here too, as well as Gabe's, his Instagram, so you can see his car and some pictures of it. It's a really awesome car, really cool setup, really cool guy. And if you guys don't already, if you follow me, you got to follow him. But I'll throw Gabe's Instagram up here too. Check it out. And he'll have a BMF dash in his car pretty soon. I'm really excited about it. Man, it turned out nice. Gabe, I hope you like it, brother. So we're going to look at a data log of his car. We've been doing a little bit of work on it. Got the idle squared away for the most part. And we are also going to be looking at some of the revving of it too. It's an auto car. It's really sweet. So if you don't know what a data log is, on the screen here, I've got a data log pulled up. A data log is created by a ECU that is capable of logging data. And what it's going to do is take all of the parameters that are in the ECU, things like, depending on what your ECU can provide, but things like your RPM, your air-fuel ratios, the load on the engine. So everything that you guys see down in this lower portion of the screen, all of these parameters down here are things that the ECU is pulling in. So the ECU, each one is capable of data logging different things. This is a data log from a mega squared ECU, and it can record a ton of data. A lot of it depends on what sensors you've got hooked up to the engine. So first part is knowing what data your ECU is capable of looking at. Then you have to know what software to use to look at it. So with a Mega Squirt, we're going to use a software called Megalog Viewer. It's one that I am native with using, and I like it a lot. So we know what values our ECU can record, but what's important to us, right? So right now we are looking at some areas of idles and revs. So if I click over here for this data log and we just started in play mode, you can see that there's a bar that goes across, and it'll actually play back what's going on in the tune over here along with while it's running. So we can see what the blue bar, where it's at in the data log, and then we can see over here where it's at in the tune. So right now we've got our AFR table, so we know where it's at, and then we have our VE table, or our fuel table. Now, if you're not familiar with how to get these two windows next to each other, there is a little button over here that says Open Tune, and you can open a VE table or an AFR table, and you can actually adjust the tune on the fly from here, which is a super nice feature of Megalog Viewer. But you can click Open Tune, select the appropriate tune that you ran during this log, and then you'll be able to see them simultaneously with each other, and see how it works out. So now we know what a data log is. Now we know that it's basically, dependent upon what values that ECU is going to bring in. Now we need to know what's important for us to look at. So with a data log, you're going to get a different answer depending on who you talk to, right? Because everybody's going to want to see different values. It kind of depends on how you learned how to tune and how you like to tune and what you like to see and what you want to look at. For me, I like to keep it fairly simple. I want to see the RPM. I want to see the MAP, or the KPA, or the load. Basically, your kilopascals is the atmospheric pressure that the engine is seeing at that point in time. Your throttle position, the coolant temp, the AFR, the fuel, or AFR, and that's pretty much it for the most part. Sometimes there's some other things I'll throw in if I need to, but a lot of times the values I want to see on the chart, you can see up here when it's playing, those values are a lot different than what's shown down below. So we've got a lot of different values that get pulled in. It's all dependent on what you want to see and what the problems are. So sometimes, like if you're troubleshooting an issue, you'll want to see different values than if you're tuning the engine, right? Like sometimes, let's see that there's a hesitation somewhere. You might want to see your dwell time. You might want to see the spark or the ignition table. There's a lot of different things that you're going to want to look at. So you got to kind of base that off of what you're going after, what you want to see. So right now we've got 3 different graphs up. We've got a top, middle, and a bottom. Again, that's all preference. It depends on how you want to see it. I like to split the values up. Right now on my bottom graph, I've got AFR and PWM idle duty. We were tuning the idle, and the PWM percentage is the pulse width modulation of the IAC motor. So I had that up. Do we need that right now? Not really. What we're watching right now is the idle and the warm up. And then after it warms up, he's going to put his foot into the throttle and hold it in some RPMs so that we can see what our AFRs look like in those areas. So for right now, not terribly important. But we can go through some of these. Like, let's see, we'll go on graph 3 here, and you can see that there's a ton of values. Like you go from the top all the way to the bottom. This ECU has the capability of logging a ton of things. So there's a bunch on here. You can look at your actual AFR. You can look at your AFR load, which would be your KPA. And then you can look at your AFR target, which is what your table is. These ECUs are going to use a lot of different things to calculate an AFR or the desired fuel at any given point in time in the table. So a lot of what you look at, you have to know what is giving you that data. So if you got 2 AFR sensors, you can use that. Your barometer, your battery voltage. Now, if you're chasing down an electrical issue, let's say, or an ignition issue, battery voltage can be very, very critical if you need to know how much voltage. Sorry, I'm watching the Datalog. You need to know how much voltage the system had. Like if your dwell is off or you got to stumble, your battery voltage can be very telling in times like that. So boost, PSI, you've got CAN bus, air bits, coolant temp, duty cycle of your injectors. There's a dwell time, EGO, EGT. There's fuel excel enrichment. So a lot of these things you really have to be familiar with. Here we're going to get into some of where we're going to be revving the engine a little bit. But you have to be very familiar with the engine itself, or not the engine, sorry, the ECU itself, in order to know what variables you want to see, right? So as we were going through this process, I noticed something in this data log, and I want to point it out to you guys because a lot of watching a data log is just knowing the tune, knowing what's in it, and what shouldn't be there. So if you look on the screen over here, we got to right about this point right before the throttle blip, and I noticed that our yellow line here went from being solid to jagged right here. So let's back up a little bit. And let's figure out what our yellow line is. So over here on the left, you can see that on this particular graph 2, which is the middle one, the 2 white lines, the solid white lines that go all the way across are what separate my graphs. I'm actually going to break this up a little bit so that I can zoom in and show you guys. So we're going to change our PWM idle duty and AFR so that they're blank, and then it'll pop it into 2 graphs. There we go. So now you can see that on the lower graph here, we've got in white our AFR. That's the jagged line there. In red, we have our VE, or our, was that our VE1? And then in yellow is our spark advance. So why is that important? So what I want to show you guys here is that on our tune, we have this set so that the cells that we idle in are all the same. So this gives you a more consistent idle, right? So if you have 4 different values and it's taking, if you look at this this blue dot over here on the AFR table, you can see that it's averaging between 4 cells, which is typical. You're going to average between 4 cells, whatever's around that blue dot. Well, if they're all different values, it's going to have to correlate a different value, and it makes the adjustment, although it's really fast anyway, it just makes it take a little longer. So if you have the cells all the same, it makes the idle very smooth or smoother, depending on the cam. Obviously, there's some mechanical things that are always going to have an effect on it. But I know for a fact that we have our spark advance set solid at 21, and I noticed that there's a few times where it jumps up here. So you can see that right here we jump up to 22.1, and then we jump up to 22.9. So it kind of starts going all over the place. That tells me that it's either going outside of the cells that we have set, or something else is happening. Now, that could be that the car is in gear. We do have it set so that when the car goes into gear, we add a couple of degrees of timing. That way, it doesn't want to die. And this is just because of the method that we chose for our PWM percentage. But yeah, so that must be what happened there. But it's things like that that you'll notice in a data log that if you're familiar with the car, you know, hey, this is not supposed to be this way, so it draws your attention to it. So a lot of it is just making sure that you're monitoring those variables in a data log that are important that you do know. And if this is your first time doing a data log, you better get familiar with the car. You got to know how things are set. And a good way to do that is to go through a data log, just watch it and say, okay, so here's what things look like normally when my car's idling or running or doing this, right? So a lot of it is just getting familiar with that stuff and being able to identify things like, hey, why is that doing that? Anyway, so let's move on. So the whole point of this data log is for us to see what our air fuel ratios are when we're holding it in different values, because there's some places where it's a little rich, some places where it needs some adjustment. So what we're doing is watching this and then being able to adjust values. So on the top graph, you'll see that our green is our throttle position sensor. And then our yellow is our coolant. So you can see we got up to temp here. We're like 163 degrees. And then we've got a throttle blip right here. That's the green. So the green also makes the RPM go up, which is the white. And then the MAP, which is our manifold pressure, also goes up. So let's talk about manifold pressure. So MAP, right? Most race cars, most race ECUs operate in speed density, which is operated off of your MAP sensor, your manifold absolute pressure sensor, or your manifold air pressure, however you want to say it. It's your MAP sensor, and it monitors it in kPa usually, which is kilopascals, and then you have to convert that into what would be PSI. So kPa, there's always some inherent kPa or atmospheric pressure, and it's typically between 70 and 80 depending on where you're at. Higher altitude, you're going to have a little bit less air pressure. At lower altitude, you'll have more air pressure. It just kind of depends on where you're at. Well, then that boost is going to cause more air pressure, so that's where you see the kPa go up. Then you know you're in a boost. But in your speed density, the really nice thing is that you can run your car in A or in boost all in the same map and not have to have a whole bunch of extra tuning to be done. You tune it below the wherever you find out your atmospheric pressure is, and that is your NA tune, and then above that is your boost. So it makes it really easy. So this red line, you can see right here, our kPa jumps up because we blip the throttle, right? When the throttle blade opens, more and more air can get in, hence more air pressure. So what we're looking for in this particular instance is our AFR. And I know that my AFR is on the second graph and it is in the white. So what I'm doing is looking in real time. There's another cool thing you can do if you click and drag in this. Like if you want to just look at a section on Megalog Viewer, it will actually pull up. It'll tell you you've got this many seconds. And then it'll tell you your RPM average, your min, and your max. So like if we wanted to look just at where that throttle blip is, we can click from there and just go right to the other side of that there. Then we can tell what was our max TPS. Well, it blipped up to 47.4%, so we're about half throttle. Coolant temp maxed at 158.5. Our max AFR was 13.9, and our min was 10.7, and AFR is kind of flipped, right? So when AFR is 10, that means that you're really rich. So that means that our AFR spiked low. And I could see that on the table here because this dot blipped way down right there. So that looks like right in this area. I don't know if you can see that or not, but right there, it's pretty rich coming back. But that's also because of right there. So in that area, right about 80 or 90 kPa, we were pretty good. We were 11.9. It's a little on the rich side. But that's coming from NA to boost, most likely. So you're going from an 80 kPa to 90 kPa, and 90 is definitely in boost. So it's a decent AFR to start with. We don't have any street miles on this yet, so it's really hard to know what it's going to need when it's under more of a load. So that's pretty decent. And then when it comes down out of that, your throttle blades close right away. So there's still fuel in there, and it comes out making it look like it's rich. So I'm not going to be too concerned about that particular area right now because you can see it comes right back up. Right there, you can see we're at 12.7. Then right there, you can see we're at about 12.10. So it's really not that bad. We could jump that up a little bit in those areas. Like if we went from here, we could drop our fuel down a little bit and help that. But the only place that I would really want to do that is 80 and 90. You get much above there, and then you're into boost, and it's a whole nother ball game. You want to make sure that you're not running lean. So we can go down a couple of points right here. There we go. That's where we saw that. So the function of this data log is to see, okay, here's the areas where we have a little too much fuel. Here's where we don't have enough. Also, if you want to check your timing, without being on a dyno, the timing aspect of it can get tricky. So I always play it on the safe side. I'd rather make a little less power and have a safe tune than be at the ragged edge and not know if we're knocking or what's going on with the car. So let's move on to the next part of the data log, and we will see what's going on. So there was that throttle blip. We're going to kind of skip along a little faster here. You can tell that our idle smoothed back out a little bit. And here we are where we're going to hold it into some areas. And this is what I really wanted to see, because this is where we'll get a good representation of what our air-fuel ratio is going to be at, like, let's say, an idle or a cruise or something like that. So right here, I see that he's holding it. I don't understand. Your phone's always listening. You can see that he's holding it at a certain RPM. Where are we at right now? So we're at about 2,300 RPM. It looks like it might rise up just a hair, but we're at about 2,600 RPM, and we don't have much of a load on it. Our KPA is at 33.4, which means it's really low. So we don't have a whole lot of load into it, and we shouldn't have a ton of fuel. So right there, it looks like we're at 12. Little on the rich side for not having a whole lot of load. So we can drop that down a little bit too. So let's drop these guys down to, drop them down 3 points. Should work out well there. The other thing on any sort of a tune is you want to make sure that you have smooth transitions. Like you don't want to jump from like a 20 to a 50 because then it's got to average that. Even if it's only for a split second, it's going to affect a lot of things, right? So you got to make sure that you've got smooth transitions between your cells when you're doing tuning. So let's continue here. So we got right about there. We already adjusted it down a few points. And he's going to go up a little bit higher. So what are we at now? About 2,900. Oh, let's go back. I missed that. Yeah, right about there. And it's a little bit. We probably could have left it where it was there. Right about 12.9, 13, but that's fine. And he goes up. Same thing, right on 13. Okay. So we took quite a bit of fuel out in that area. So what we can do, yeah, there we go. He's holding it again. 1,500. Okay, so we already adjusted in that area. So here's the other thing I'm going to do is on this bottom row, this is your D cell, right? So we can take some fuel out of that, the likelihood of ever being there. So we can go down a few more on that. The likelihood of ever being there while you're driving is slim to none. You'd have to be in gear, slowing down with no throttle on to be in there. And at that point, you're in your fuel cut anyway, so it shouldn't matter. So let's see. There's some of our other blips he had. I'm looking at our air-fuel ratio, and it looks like we're, yeah, again, it's right about 10 there, so I already cut some on the bottom side, so that should be better. I'm not so much worried about the throttle blips because, like I said, you're introducing a ton of fuel and then you're shutting the throttle blades right away, so it's getting no more air, and all that fuel is still in the combustion chamber, so it's gonna read that it's rich. So that part I'm not really concerned with. I'm more so worried about some of the places where, yeah, so that's good right there. So I see that we're right about 14 and a half to 15 under no load. Well, pretty much no load. Yeah, that's good there. A few more throttle blips. So the spikes that I'm seeing, if you notice, all the yellow dots are on the bottom, which is indicative of the throttle snapping shut. So you can see this blue line on the table goes up, over, and then bam, straight down. So that means the throttle blade shut. So it was putting all this fuel in there, and now, of course, it's going to read rich. So I already took out quite a bit on the bottom of that VE table there, so that should be good. And then let's look at some more of these. Yeah, so all those high spots where the AFR goes to 10. Yeah, so right in here, this is where I would expect us to be, right around the 11.5 to 12 range, under that much load and that RPM. So that's good there. You can see that we're at where those 4 dots, you see how there's those 4 squares? It's averaging between those 4 right now. So what it's doing is taking the average of 51, 52, 48, and 48 to get our VE number. And we're at 50 for our VE. So that's pretty close. I don't want to take much more, like I said, because we're just sitting here idling or revving the car up. I don't want to take a ton of fuel out and then get into where we're driving and we run into a lean condition. I would rather have this be under a driving condition, but we're trying to get it at least close enough to drive, and we're there. We just need to get some time on the car. And then let's see right here. Yeah, so again, we're at 70 or an 80 for a load, and we're at 52 to 43. So what is our average? We're at 53 for our VE percentage. Yeah, that's to be expected. When you go a little bit, the throttle blade snaps shut. We're in the bottom, so it's going to read rich. No big deal there. Then we go right here. Here's another blip. That one, 12.5. That's good. That's good. You can see that we're averaging those 4 squares there. We had a 63 for a VE. You can see right here in this red number here. That's our actual on the table. So that's good. And then you can see when it falls off there, as it's going down, then of course our AFR spikes up a little bit more. So I feel like all those throttle blips look good. Here's one that might not be the greatest. Right about, we're at 10.8. Yeah, 11.8. Yeah, so that one may be a little rich, but again, we're on the cusp of going from NA to boost, so I don't want to take a bunch away right there. Looking pretty good. 12.4 AFR, and again, 50 to 65 for our load is not a lot. I'll show you what it's at idle. So right here at idle, you can see where we're hovering at. Oh, it won't pause for me. Come on, pause. There we go. So you can see right here where we're hovering at. What are we at? We're at about 49.5 for a KPA. So as soon as we get the car going, our KPA is going to go up. So we're going to be between 50 and 80 right up here under load. And we're probably going to pull a little bit out, but we'll see how it likes it under load once we get there. So I think you guys kind of get the gist of this. I don't want to drag on forever. I just was trying to walk you guys through some data logs and what the process is, what you go through, what data you evaluate. And again, a lot of it is dependent on what you're doing at the moment. Like right now, we're looking at where our fueling's at when we're just sitting idle and revving the engine, which again is not terribly indicative of the load you're going to be under, because if you can envision a 3,000-pound car also through a transmission, the load's going to be a lot different, and it's going to require different amounts of fuel than if you're just sitting still and revving the car. So, and then again, you can expect to see your AFR gauge read a 10 if you slam the throttle open and close it, because it's going to dump all this fuel in, and then you're going to shut the throttle blade and have no more air go in. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. But we are about all the way through this data log, so I'm going to call it quits here for now. We've adjusted a few things on this data log, and I think that it looks, or on the tune, sorry, but we've adjusted a few things on this tune, and it looks good. I'm happy with what I see, so I'm going to give Gabe the thumbs up to get the car some more time. Hopefully he can get it on the ground once he gets that dash installed. But anyway, guys, thank you for being here. I appreciate you watching. If you guys have any ideas or more things that you want me to cover in depth on data logging or tuning or whatever it is, please leave it in the comments below. I love trying to make videos for you guys. Don't forget to check out the website. I've got the BMF dash on there. There'll be a lot of things coming soon for the dash. There's a lot of options that I've got for it. I've got 10-inch screens, 15-inch screens, 7-inch screens. So there's a lot of options, and I think the latest one that I did for Gabe really turned out really nice. The drop-in for the Fox bodies, the 87 and 93, it's a cool idea, and I really like it. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.